the newsagents.
Georgia, how do you cast your vote?
Yeah! Ladies and gentlemen, we are here tonight to officially nominate Kamala Harris for president. Five, get loud, another round of shots. DNC, turn out for what?
That is Little John, or Lil John, from Georgia.
That's my nickname for you.
I thought I was Big John.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Little John from Georgia is just one of 50 people announcing their support for Kamala Harris in what is known as the roll call, where every state in the United States of America goes around the room and say, I'm supporting Kamala Harris. Some do it more theatrically than others.
In some ways, what this convention, any convention, is all about, the moment that someone achieves the loftiest goal to become a candidate for their party to be president of the United States. It is an historic moment. But away from the fun of that, there are other things happening, serious politics in the convention, in the Democratic National Convention on Tuesday, not least an appearance from former President Barack Obama, someone who once talked about the audacity of hope. This is a party that is daring to hope again, daring to dream that another magical golden run, just like that Barack Obama enjoyed in 2008, is about to happen all over again. Welcome to the Newsagents.
It's John.
It's Lewis.
And this place has just been set alight because on the stage now, Michelle Obama has just finished, Barack Obama has come on. And for Michelle Obama, someone who professes to hate politics, she is so bloody good at it.
You can see and understand why so many Democrats have for years been yearning for Michelle Obama to herself enter the political arena. She's never wanted to do it, but she just electrified this place. And honestly, looking around here is one of the most spectacular political sights I've seen. In this coliseum, it feels like now, of politics. We are surrounded by tens of thousands of people, all on their feet, welcoming Barack Obama, who is still the absolute darling, if not hero of this party, to the stage.
And it'll be interesting to see how long it takes him to settle the audience down so that he can begin his speech. Because of course it was 20 years ago that Barack Obama just electrified a Democratic Party convention with his speech, which would in turn propel him to the presidency, 2 terms, and still absolutely revered and loved in this place.
The torch has been passed. Now it is up to all of us to fight for the America we believe in. And make no mistake, it will be a fight. For all the incredible energy we've been able to generate over the last few weeks, for all the rallies and the memes, this will still be a tight race in a closely divided country. A country where too many Americans are still struggling. Where a lot of Americans don't believe government can help. And as we gather here tonight, the people who will decide this election are asking a very simple question. Who will fight for me? Who's thinking about my future, about my children's future, about our future together? One thing is for certain, Donald Trump is not losing sleep over that question. Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems since he rode down his golden escalator 9 years ago. It has been a constant stream of gripes and grievances that's actually been getting worse now that he's afraid of losing to Kamala. There's the childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes.
Well, that was Barack Obama completely and utterly still being able to enchant the Democrats and the Democratic Party, moving between serious themes and lighter themes. I mean, basically taking the piss out of Trump repeatedly there. You won't be able to see it there. You probably may have seen the clip by now, but when he's talking about this obsession with crowd sizes, he makes this ever so gentle, kind of just brings his thumb and his index finger together in such a way that you might just think what he might be referring to, sort of obsessions with size and so on. And the crowd obviously absolutely loving it. The magic is still completely there. And I have to say, the stadium that we're in, the size of it, when it is full in that way, and when there is a speaker like Barack Obama or Michelle Obama who captivate that room, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. If you can imagine just a cascade of people, row after row, in every single direction, every single one of them on their feet, every single one of them willing that speaker to make them laugh, but also to make them think. It is difficult to describe just the sort of psychology of that moment and how impressive that kind of amphitheatre of politics, that's how it feels, a coliseum of politics, how that is.
You can query Barack Obama's delivery on some of the speeches that he's made about whether the follow-up has been as good as the oratory when he delivers. But the pure political, theatrical ability to deliver a speech, I think he is without parallel. And I remember seeing him for the first time in 2008 at a high school in Keene in New Hampshire, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'd never seen anything like it in British politics. You mentioned size. I don't want to kind of get into the whole weirdness of crowd sizes and the like. But at the same time as Barack Obama had electrified the United Centre where we were on the floor listening to him, and I don't know how many thousands of people, but it was rammed. I mean, absolutely rammed. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz were in the same arena
Just up the road
in Wisconsin, where Trump had held the Republican National Convention. That too was rammed. So if we're going to just talk about one thing, and it might be meaningless, but in terms of motivation, positivity, sense of power, momentum, whatever it is, the Democratic Party is infused in a way that I've not seen before.
Obviously, the comparisons that everyone has been making is with that golden run of 2008, when, of course, Obama ran for president and won and had a landslide. And that's redolent tonight and important tonight in so many ways, right? I mean, this has been a convention of transition, of, again, the baton, we keep saying, being passed. That's the phrase they keep using from the podium. And actually, there are multiple batons being passed, right? There's the obvious one that we saw last night, which was Biden to Harris. We saw as well Hillary Clinton, in a way, passing the baton of kind of female suffrage, of women's rights, and of trying to crack that glass ceiling about which she always talks. So she's passing that as well to Kamala Harris. There is another obvious one from Barack Obama to Kamala Harris in terms of the burden she now has in terms of having to prosecute civil rights and the long march towards justice and racial emancipation, which in a country which only 150 or so years ago still had slavery, that she now represents and embodies. And one of the interesting things that I think that Obama, and themes that he was talking about in that speech, and it's a theme that he's spoken about a lot since he left office. He talks about the effect of online radicalization. He talks a lot about the idea, which is a very Obama-type theme, of, you know, there being much more in common than that divides us, and so on. And it's worth listening to a little bit of that now.
That sense of mutual respect has to be part of our message. Our politics have become so polarized these days that all of us across the political spectrum seem so quick to assume the worst in others unless they agree with us on every single issue. We start thinking that the only way to win is to scold and shame and out-yell the other side. And after a while, regular folks just tune out, or they don't bother to vote. Now, that approach may work for the politicians who just want attention and thrive on division. But it won't work for us to make progress on the things we care about, the things that really affect people's lives. We need to remember that we've all got our blind spots and contradictions and prejudices, and that if we want to win over those who aren't yet ready to support our candidates, we need to listen to their concerns and maybe learn something in the process. After all, if a parent or grandparent occasionally says something that makes us cringe, we don't automatically assume they're bad people. We recognize that the world is moving fast, that they need time and maybe a little encouragement to catch up. Our fellow citizens deserve the same grace we hope they'll extend to us.
And I think this is a really interesting thing, right? Because Obama does put at the door of many of the American Republic's problems this idea of self-righteousness, of online life driving polarization. I often feel that Obama has spent many of the years of his post-presidency almost imploring us to not be online, to wind back some of these and rewind some of these effects of polarization that has come from politics being in the online world. And I almost sort of feel like with this convention, it is almost, with all of the emphasis now on hope and optimism, which are really Obama themes, it's almost like this is a kind of test case as to whether in the America of 2024, with all of that polarization that has happened in the post-Trump world, you can have 08 again. And we just don't know the answer to that yet. Yeah. We will know in 80 days.
I mean, the simple point I'd pick up on 08, of course, was that it followed the most bitter battle between him and Hillary Clinton for the nomination.
Yes.
And so when it got to the convention, there was a lot of people feeling quite bruised about the whole thing of it. And that, and afterwards when he won the election, it was the kind of, the cabinet of rivals of bringing Hillary Clinton in as Secretary of State.
But it was a completely different tenor of politics at that time, right? Because you have McCain.
But I wanted to make the point about what you're saying about, he says about online divisiveness and the language that people use. He's not aiming that at Trump supporters. He's aiming that at his own supporters as much.
To some extent, yes.
And he's kind of saying, stop being so woke. Stop believing that everyone is perfect, and if they take a wrong line on something or other, they are to be condemned. I think that Barack Obama has been really interesting on this whole area of online kind of bile, prejudice, the idea that everyone is perfect, and if you don't absolutely 100% support my position, you are to be condemned. I think Barack Obama has been really good on all of that, because I think there is so much toxicity as well. It's just the way that he has fired up this Democratic Party that was feeling so morose, and and you just think of the rock stars, the bench, as they kind of say in sporting terms, that they are able to call up on. And we've seen that over the past 2 days.
Well, going back to that thing about the hand gestures and him making fun of Trump, I think one of the sort of themes of this convention has been the quite noticeable shift in the way the Dems are talking about Trump. There was a period, I think if we'd been having this convention 4 years ago, there was a period when Obama himself, very regularly, and Michelle Obama, talked very darkly about Trump and about the threat that he posed to the Republic and how corrosive he was. And of course, they still hint on these themes and they still talk about that. But they are doing so generally, I think, with a lighter touch. They are leaning into the idea of mocking him as much as fearing him. And you see that has been a consistent theme from all of the sort of headline acts.
But there was also a rhetorical power from Michelle Obama. We've got to talk about Michelle Obama because, she has always said, I don't want to go anywhere near politics. It's like being Leonardo da Vinci and having the ability to paint the Sistine Chapel, but saying, I just hate painting, I'm not going to bother with it. And yet every now and then she gets the paintbrush out and creates a little masterpiece. And I felt that was the speech that she delivered tonight.
She could have been president. She could have been.
Was so well crafted. And her dig at Trump was pointed, and it had a lightness of touch, but it had a moral outrage to it too. If you remember, Donald Trump had talked in the most appalling racist terms, saying that the problem with illegal immigrants and why black people should support me is that they are taking black jobs. By which he meant, if you are black, you are unskilled, you are cleaning toilets, you are flipping hamburgers, and you're never going to do anything more worthwhile. Michelle Obama wanted to go after him.
Now, unfortunately, we know what comes next. We know folks are going to do everything they can to distort her truth. My husband and I sadly know a little something about this. For years, Donald Trump did everything in his power to try to make people fear us. See, his limited, narrow view of the world made him feel threatened by the existence of two hard-working, highly educated, successful people who happen to be black. Wait. I want to know. Who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs?
I mean, you try and stop yourself being a bit giddy about these people. You try and sort of be trying to maintain critical eye, but it is very hard in a hall like that when you have two speeches like that, not to include that the Obamas are nothing else but extraordinary political class acts. I can't quite think of anyone else quite like them, perhaps the Clintons in a slightly different way. I mean, now we've had 2 days of this convention. It has really struck me in terms of kind of the other themes of what they're talking about and their attack. It has really struck me just how strong their message discipline has been on the economy in particular. And then it has a very particular theme, and the Obamas both brought this out, specifically about class. Each and every headline speaker consistently emphasizing it again and again. The ordinary background of Harris versus the plutocratic sort of billionaire privilege of Donald Trump. And that is being repeated sort of again and again with a really strong consistency. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, really the only two themes of this convention really are the economy and these sort of built in with these sort of class issues, and abortion. Everything else, even kind of previously big ticket democratic items, say like climate change, for example, Gaza for sure, completely absent. It is very clear that in terms of the political strategy for the next 80 days, this is going to be the sort of contours, or at least of what the Democrats want to argue about, and how they want to frame Trump versus Harris.
The other thing we've seen today is the Democratic Party using Trump defectors. And so we had a speech from someone who used to be Trump's press secretary, Stephanie Grisham, who was there supporting Kamala Harris because she thought Donald Trump was a liar. And I was sort of sitting in here a little bit earlier, and I thought, bloody hell, that's Michael Cohen walking past, Trump's former attorney, who gave evidence against Trump in the whole hush money trial in New York, because he'd been the person who had facilitated the payment to Stormy Daniels, paying her $130,000 so that she wouldn't say anything disobliging about Donald Trump during the 2016 election campaign. And Michael Cohen is incidentally absolutely no lover of the British media. And whenever I said to him, could we do an interview, he kept on saying, no, I hate the British media, I hate you a lot, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, at the third attempt of me trying to charm him and kind of wear him down, he eventually did answer a few questions.
Of course he did.
I started with the obvious question. What are you doing here?
Well, I got onto an airplane this morning, and the pilot was fantastic. We took off directly on time. We landed 4 minutes early. I got into a cab, and I came here.
Happy days. But what are you doing here? Why have you come?
Because this is the convention. I've been a Democrat my entire life. I support Kamala Harris. I support Tim Walz. And as far as I'm concerned, a strong America means a strong world. A weak America means a weak world. Donald Trump will make the world weak, will cause all sorts of havoc, not just here in America, but around the entire world. And I truly believe that our democratic republic, our Constitution has to stand. And so I am here supporting the only candidate in this race that believes the same as I.
What do you think Donald Trump feels about the fact that now Joe Biden is out and Kamala Harris is in the race?
See, that's a great question. I don't care what Donald Trump thinks, right? The reality is the voters of America see through the guy. They see he's a fraud, a con man. He's a bullshit artist to the nth degree. No one's going to vote for him. Yes, he's going to have his 32% of MAGA that's going to vote for him no matter what. He could kill someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it if you're MAGA. To the rest of us, we care about our democracy, we care about our Constitution, and at the end of the day, that's why people will vote Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, because again, out of the two candidates, they're the only ones that care.
Doesn't seem entirely wrong, does it?
Well,
in terms of his analysis.
I don't think they've buried their differences. I
No,
think it's fair
I
to
don't.
conclude
From that there is still a little bit of fire in Michael Cohen's heart that burns brightly.
Talking about like burying their differences, isn't it amazing the way, I mean, again, going back to that theme about Obama making fun of Trump, in a way, like in a really weird way, I mean, this really is history coming full circle, right? In the sense that what was it? It is said, at least, it's one of the reasons that Trump wanted to run in the first place. Do you remember, of course?
Yeah.
In the 2011, you know, before you were there, I suppose, but the 2011 White House Correspondents' Dinner, when famously, of course, Obama took the piss out of Trump while he was sat there. You know, making joke after joke at Trump's expense, because there was some talk at that time about whether he would get into the 2012 presidential race, and of course, in the end, he didn't really. And they say that this, you know, infuriated Trump so much that he decided that he wanted to get into the race. And obviously, Trump had been making sort of ridiculous assertions about birtherism and all that sort of thing. But it infuriated him so much that he wanted to get into the race and settle a score with Obama. And that personal kind of relationship is still going on, and that kind of dynamic between these two completely different men. And the other thing I thought about the last few days is we've seen three big speakers now: Biden, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama. And each of them in their own individual ways. Of course they want Harris to win because they care. Of course they want Harris to win because they want a Democratic president. But they've got a really private and personal reason, I think, that they need her to win. Because each of them, their own reputation in history is up for grabs here, right? If Harris doesn't win and Trump wins, Biden will be blamed because he should have got out of the race earlier and given him more time. If Trump wins again in terms of Hillary, it's like it's even more grievous for her than she lost the first time. And for Obama as well, he knows that, you know, to slightly paraphrase one of his favourite quotes from Martin Luther King, the arc of history is long, and if Trump wins again for Obama, it will bend towards judgment.
Yeah.
Because Obama, historians will conclude that it was under his presidency that he allowed these dark forces of populism to grow, to incubate, to metastasize. And he, at least to some extent, fairly or unfairly, will be blamed for that. So in terms of Harris's chances, they all want her to win, of course, for her role in history and for the sake of history itself, but also for how history will judge them.
There was a line in Barack Obama's speech where he said, you know, Donald Trump wants to rerun the movie and the sequel is never as good. And I was speaking to someone who was a former governor of Illinois, who I kind of sort of know, and he was saying that he thought that actually what is happening is that the American people have had 9 years now of this. It was 2015 that he went down the escalator
long time
to announce his run. And it's the same thing every time. And it's just getting tired and it's getting a bit boring. And Donald Trump is not as interesting as he was. When he burst onto the scene in 2016, it was astonishing and it was kind of, wow. What he's got now is his base, who absolutely adore him. And if the movie carries on for another 4 or 5 seasons, they're happy. But an awful lot of people are weary of it. And I think that is something that is a really contrasting vision from what we're seeing from the Republicans and what we're seeing from the Democrats, is that it's more of the same with Donald Trump, and we know what he's going to say, and we know where he stands, and we know his obsessions with certain issues, and his weird kind of preoccupations about Kamala Harris and whatever else. Kamala Harris is very new to this, and there's no doubt that they are feeling good about where they are right now. In a moment, We're speaking to this guy called Alastair Campbell, and he has a podcast, I think, but we're going to talk to him about the intersection of British politics and US politics and what we can each learn from the other. Well, a very warm welcome to Alastair Campbell to Britain's most popular podcast.
Not sure about that, John.
We've looked at the charts today. We've looked at the charts today. What's number one?
Well, it depends. The number one show in the UK today is The Rest Is Politics. The number one episode today is your episode. Is the episode that you did yesterday, because we haven't done one for several days. But I suspect by tomorrow, the normal
service will be resumed.
I think you'll find that the top show at the moment is Charlotte Dawson's Naughty Corner.
You probably know, Lewis. I don't know how much you know about this ridiculous podcast industry, but you probably know that the top shows, it's dependent on growth. But we have consistently been the number one show in the UK for 2 years. Thank you very much. Shall we talk about politics?
Anyway, what's good is that we've come all the way to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and our top guest so far has been Alastair Campbell.
What was your impression of it all last night? The Joe Biden farewell, everything running over. The kind of sense you almost got that they wanted to say thank you to him, but they also wanted to say thank you for leaving the stage.
I actually found it very moving. I love Joe Biden. I think he's a great guy. I think he's been a good president. I think it must have been incredibly difficult the last few months. I think you're right. It felt like power was moving away from him. But at the same time, no, I thought it was warmer than that. I did. And it's true that there were people there standing and clapping and saying we love Joe, who are very happy that he's not standing, but it doesn't mean they don't love Joe. So no, I found it quite moving last night.
How many conventions have you been to?
This is my first, because...
Is it really?
Yeah, in government.
Well, you couldn't have come, I suppose, then.
Not really. Although I have noticed one or two Labour people around, but... no,
Is it wise that the Labour people are here?
Yeah, I think this campaigning is... you can learn from each other. So yeah, I think I've got no problem with that. There's always been Labour people who've come to conventions, and and likewise there have always been Americans who've come to our conferences. But no, I've never been to one before. So
it's such a different beast, isn't it? I hadn't been to one before either. John's obviously been to. He started in the 19th century, but we. It's such a different thing to British Party conference, isn't it? Like, it feels it's so not least just the timing. Like, it's so geared around the networks, and it still feels like in so many ways our conferences.
You say it's geared around the networks, but as John said last night, it overran.
Well, that is true. But they were still carrying it. That's why I couldn't believe it.
I bet if you had been doing the job for Tony Blair,
I'd have gone nuts.
You would have gone absolutely ape that you've missed the main bulletins.
I wouldn't worry about that so much. I just hate the idea of planning something to the minute and then it doesn't stick to it. My control freak tendencies would not have enjoyed last night.
But do you think that was a bit amateur?
No, I don't really, because I think the world's changed. I think there was a time when all that mattered was the kind of live coverage. I think that's all changed now. I think what matters is the message that comes out over the week. And thus far, I think they've not put a foot wrong.
Are you surprised at actually how well things have gone for Harris? I mean, in a sense, in terms of certainly in terms of the media management of it. Only a month ago, it still seems extraordinary. Like, only a month ago, we were talking about a party that was basically in free fall. People thought this was going to be a bloodbath. And yet, no one predicted that she could have transformed the party's fortunes in such a short length of time.
I remember George Bush always used to say that, he got to the top by being misunderestimated. And I think there's a little bit of that with her as well. I think there's a little bit of that with Joe Biden. In fact, Jill said last night he's been underestimated all his life. John knows this from when he was in Washington. If you're the vice president, unless you're Dick Cheney, who was very, very powerful, most vice presidents, they are playing very, very much second fiddle. To some extent, less than the departmental heads, the cabinet ministers. Part of their job is to be second fiddle. So she's not, and also I think her team and she would accept that her start wasn't the best. All sorts of issues, all sorts of problems. But I think that she's developed, and this is the great thing about politics. People change and people develop. And what you've seen, I think, is somebody really rising to the moment. So there was so much doubt. You even had, I think, the suggestion was that people like Obama saying, let's have a kind of a bit of a contest and see what goes and what have you. But everybody else was saying, no. She's the one. She's got to show she can rise to the moment. And thus far, she's not put her foot wrong.
When you listen to the speeches, and you had a variety of, big stars from the Democratic Party speaking last night, there was no policy debate at all? I mean, if you're going to compare and contrast to a party political, a party conference, what do you think?
I mean, a lot of people in the UK complain there's no real debate at our party conferences anymore. But even walking in, when we were just walking in now, if you're at Labour, you're getting hundreds of leaflets. You're getting people bombarding you. I got one thing which I didn't even understand. It was a kind of abusive thing about Trump. And look, last night the speeches, and tonight will be the same. They're choreographed. They form a story. In the country's #1 podcast, Rory Stewart made the point this morning that what happened last night. What happened last night is that they told a story through the night, and then there'll be another chapter of the story tonight. And that's what they do, and so I think you've got to slightly think of them differently. It's like the union guy yesterday, right? To a British eye, a union leader standing up with Trump is a scab T-shirt, getting Joe Biden to say I'm the most pro-union president ever, and I'm really proud of it. I think you'd see that at a Labour Party conference, because the politics are just different. It's not a debating chamber. It's a show.
Do you feel kinship with the Democrats?
Democrats?
Kinship with the Democrats. When you come in here, do you feel at home? Because obviously you're also someone who know a lot of Republicans very well, and you got close to quite a few Republicans in the
but no, I feel politically totally at home here. Yeah.
Do you think the Democrats and the Labour Party these days are that closely aligned, or do you feel that they've diverged? Because the politics, as you say, politics are very different. And the politics is very different within the Democratic coalition even now.
I mean, it slightly worries me. This isn't a sort of Labour-Democrat point, but for example, I read the Project 2025 thing on the plane over.
That is quite something, isn't it?
Well, it's quite something. It is a really, really strange document. But there was one mention of Margaret Thatcher. There were 2 mentions of Britain, both of which were about Brexit. Now, and I found that quite shocking when you think that there were pages on China, pages on Iran, pages on quite a lot about Europe, but not about Britain. And so I think we maybe were at the pretty heady. You had Thatcher, Reagan, you had Clinton, Blair. I think there just isn't that same kinship, and I'm afraid.
What about Blair Bush?
Yeah, Blair Bush as well. But
you didn't mention that.
No, because I'm talking in the context of the Democrats. So Thatcher, Reagan was very much them as the Republicans. Clinton, Blair. Look, Tony got on really well with George Bush, but Clinton, that relationship was really, really politically incredibly solid. And
you were looking to the Democrats in the 90s.
Absolutely.
Very strongly in terms of what Clinton had done.
One of the interviews that Rory and I did yesterday was with this guy, Bob Mulholland, who's a veteran Californian superdelegate. He was one of the guys who came over from California to kind of show us about attack and rebuttal, and there's always been that cross-pollination. So look, there's a lot of the Democrat strategists and pollsters I know, people that I've worked with, and yeah, so I don't think I'd felt at home in Milwaukee. I mean, I wouldn't have gone there.
How does Kamala Harris handle the next 80 days or 75 days, whatever it is now? Because people are talking about this being like a British general election, in the sense that it's a sprint. You're not going to, because she is a new candidate introducing herself to the American people.
It is very, very different to what they're used to. I mean, I've never really understood American campaigns, how they govern, as one of them has to do, and these incredibly long, grueling, unbelievably expensive campaigns. We interviewed somebody yesterday who told us that a lot of these politicians spend about 60 to 70, some of them 80% of their time on fundraising because of the money that you need to campaign. I mean, it's just crazy. There's no comparison with our campaigns. Where the comparison is valid here, I think you're right, is that for them this is short. Now, I think that's great for her because, look, Trump has global name recognition in the United States, 100%. She doesn't necessarily have that in the same way, but she's now got the best platform you could possibly have to build that and develop that. And as I said earlier, so far I think she's got a story that she's telling, she's pushing it out there, it's developing, and she also looks to me like she's tough. And I'll tell you the other thing, you get the feeling that she is inside Trump's head in a way that he's not inside hers, and that's incredibly important in a campaign. She has got her strategy and she's pursuing it. He's all over the place at the moment. Everything he says, that I mean, I said to somebody today, I said, this line he's running, communist Kamala, is that going to work? He said, are you crazy? He said, the young generation here, they don't know what you're talking about when they call him communist Kamala. So I think she's in a good place.
I mean, you knew the Clintons well, it must have been quite the moment for her last night when you were watching her. I mean, because everyone was talking about handing the baton over from Biden to Harris, which she's done, but there was also a handing over in terms of women's leadership, right, within the Democratic Party, and she was doing it last night. It must have been. I mean, I was watching it thinking, this almost feels cathartic for Clinton, right? She looked so comfortable, but sort of exorcising some of the demons from 2016, right, when she last addressed this convention.
Well, do you know, I thought. I had lunch with one of Hillary Clinton's people today, and I said that's the best I've ever seen Hillary Clinton's speech. I thought it was amazing. I thought the climax was fantastic, and I suspect she was a little bit taken aback just by the incredible reception when she walked on. They wouldn't shut up, and she had to kind of eventually calm them down. I think it was cathartic, and I thought that line about looking through the glass ceiling and seeing Kamala Harris there. I'll tell you the other thing that you hear around the place is that, and you've got to remember about, I think the Clintons and the Obamas are different to this extent. The Clintons are utterly 100% political animals. Democrat Party, campaigns and what have you. And I suspect that I sense that she will have been helping Kamala a lot.
Well, they're quite close by all accounts.
Yeah, I think that's genuine, and I think you felt that last night.
Alastair, can I ask you a question about sort of foreign policy and linking up with the US? And I go back to, when I was a political correspondent, Tony had just become Prime Minister, you were Director of Communications. I came over on a couple of trips with you to Washington then. And there's the old line that, you find out what America thinks and do a little bit less. And that's a definition of British foreign policy. Well, how different were you on anything to the Americans in terms of foreign policy?
Well, I mean, if you look at the really, really big things like, some Iraq and... Well, I'll give you another example. Take Kosovo. I think at Kosovo, there were points where we were in a different place. And Tony had to use a lot of leverage and the so-called special relationship and all the rest of it. And I think on trade, there's often been differences. So, but I do worry for Britain that because we've left the European Union, this is the point that they make in that weird document, but on this point they're right, that a lot of Britain's power in our relationship with the United States came from our power within Europe, and that's gone. And therefore they're looking at us in a different way. Now, and I think it's a challenge to Keir Starmer to rebuild that. And it's rebuildable. It is definitely rebuildable, and personal relationships will matter. And it would be great if you have Keir Starmer in Downing Street and Kamala Harris in the White House. I think there'll be, there's possibilities of developing that.
When I asked about the differences between the Democrats and Labour in terms of the internal politics of the two parties, I mean, isn't one of the big differences that actually the Democrats have gone in a really very substantially different direction by comparison to how Keir Starmer has governed the Labour Party, right? Like last night, saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders is speaking tonight. Like the Biden project has been to embrace the left and actually in many ways has moved the Democratic Party quite hard to the progressive left on economic policy and all sorts of other things, which Harris is probably going to continue. I mean, actually, they're completely different political strategies, aren't they, that the two sides, the two parties have pursued in recent years. And maybe that's something that Starmer should think about when you consider how shallow, in some ways, the Labour victory was a few months ago.
I think that's an interesting observation, because generally, I think people would say that the Democrat Party is to the right of the Labour Party on some big issues, but I said to John earlier that there was, when he did his big, I'm proud to be the most pro-union president ever. I can't imagine Tony having said that. I don't know whether Keir Starmer would say something like that. I thought what was really interesting about AOC's speech. Absolutely right. I think a few years ago, it's entirely possible to imagine that she could have headed off into a kind of Jeremy Corbyn type position within, the equivalent in the Democrat Party. She hasn't, and I thought her speech was among the best last night. I thought the best speech last night were Hillary, her, and then the basketball guys.
So is that because the British left or the American left and the people involved are smarter or kind of more savvier than the British left, or is it because of the differences in terms of how Biden and Starmer have treated them?
I think it's to do with the party, the way the party is formed.
And the fact that they're afraid of Trump. There's something that kind of binds them together. There's something galvanising
there, but I mean, there is a look. A few weeks ago, everybody went out there pretty much until George Clooney did his article saying Joe should go, everybody was out there facing cameras and saying Joe Biden is the right guy and he's our leader, and virtually everybody. Some were saying silent. Now they're all saying Kamala Harris is the best thing since sliced bread. It's just part of how they operate. But I think there is a point about the. I don't think it's to do with left and right. I think it's to do with conviction on principle, on positions that other people are going to find difficult. That's what I think you need in politics.
Well, we should probably let you go and find Rory Stewart, Alastair.
Yeah, he must be
here
somewhere.
Strange man that you hang around with.
Rory Stewart must be
No,
here.
he's gone. He came yesterday. We spent a very busy day talking to lots of people.
He could only spend one day with you. And that's why you've had to come and spend time with us. You're lonely.
I came to spend time with you because John Sopel says we can't get anybody. You're getting Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, all these people that you've done.
Okay.
You know. And the other thing, he also said yes, you can mention your children's books about politics.
No, I said you couldn't.
You said I could.
No, we can mention my book, Strangeland, coming out on September the 26th.
Well, that's weird. You haven't mentioned that before, John.
Strangeland. Well, look, if I come to your party,
yeah,
your launch party, will you allow me to say just once that I'm going from here at the end of the week to Scotland to the Edinburgh Festival to talk about my new books on politics for children, because we need to get the next generation involved?
You've done it.
Thank you.
Alastair Campbell, thank you.
Thanks, Alastair.
Before we go, Mr. Goodall, while you were, I don't know, I think you were having a pedicure. I was working, and I was in the corridor, and I met a guy called...
Oh, where's this going?
Matt Friend, who is huge on TikTok and Instagram.
Okay.
American, who's coming to perform in London, and he's an impressionist.
Like Monet, or?
No, nor a post-impressionist.
All right, okay, fine.
Someone who does impressions of other people's voices, which you are wont to do from time to time. Let's listen.
Well, let me pivot, because actually we won the war, and we're winning the war in impressions and his content, so come to the show, it's going to be great. What's the next question, right? Yeah.
Did you lose the 2020 election?
I did not lose. It's a horrible question. It's a nasty question. It's like asking if Piers Morgan likes Meghan Markle. Okay, the answer, we already know it. We already know the truth, right?
So what did you think?
I don't know, John. I mean, I know clearly he needs a little bit of help, because bit of a horrible impression there, because it sounded more like my brother. My brother, John. Little John. That's my nickname for you. Little John. And by the way, I hear you've been talking to Lion Alastair, John, a little bit later on. Is that not happening at some point?
I thought that was quite a bad impression from him, actually. Like, I thought it sounded like Trump's brother or something. It was like sort of little bit of it.
Okay, so you've given him how many marks out of 10 for that?
Well, John, it's not for me to give him marks out of 10. He's just very bad. Very, very bad man. Very bad man.
Sad.
Not my friend. Might be called... Oh, there goes my laptop. That's great. Oh, great. Oh, no. You'll have to pay for that, John. Pay for that. Lion, John.
We're going to now listen to Matt's impression of Barack Obama.
I'm just happy to be here. I love you, London. David Cameron, shout out, and I'll see you out there. Thank you. It's going to be fun.
Thank you
Good to
very
see
much.
you.
Nice to see you too.
Thank you.
Be well.
Thanks.
Well, that was much better. That was very good. I'm not going to do an Obama for various reasons.
He also did a Prince Charles.
It was easy to do that. Very, very good. Very good. And it's King Charles, John. Or is this a sort of temporally specific Charles impression? Sort of a little bit sort of earlier, not high Charles. Yeah.
Okay, enough.
Have we got that clip?
Enough.
Have you just teased it? Haven't got the clip?
No, enough. I think the poor listener has had enough of you and your impressions. We will be back tomorrow. Say goodbye in Ed Miliband. Say goodbye in Ed Miliband.
Only if you got Bumble and Bumble. Goodbye from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.